You know that feeling, right? That constant pressure to fit in, to say the right thing, to play by all the unwritten rules of society. That feeling of just being completely exhausted from playing a part.
Well, what if I told you that this feeling is nothing new, and that about 2,400 years ago, one man got so fed up with pretending that he built his entire life's philosophy around just stopping. He decided he was going to live a life of total, shameless, and honestly, brilliant authenticity.
Okay, so let's get into it. We are going to explore the absolutely wild life and rebellion of one of history's most fascinating and provocative thinkers, Diogenes of Sinope, the original dog philosopher.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the world that made him tick. Then we'll figure out what it actually means to live like a dog. After that, we'll break down his blueprint for a rebel life, trace his pretty surprising influence through history, and finally, ask what his radical ideas can teach us today.
Right. So to really get a rebel, you first have to understand what in the world they were rebelling against. Let's paint the picture. Diogenes was living in what we call the Hellenistic period. Basically, the golden age of the Greek city-state, the polis, was over. Alexander the Great was on the move, creating this huge impersonal empire. And for the average person, this meant a massive identity crisis. The old traditions, the old rules, they just didn't seem to hold up anymore. Sound familiar? It was an age of deep anxiety, not all that different from our own.
And it's right in the middle of this chaos that our hero, or maybe our anti-hero, shows up. He wasn't born some great philosopher. He was basically forged into one by failure.
So the story goes, Diogenes got kicked out of his hometown, Sinope, for supposedly messing with the currency. A total disgrace, right? But here's where we see the guy's genius. For him, exile wasn't a punishment, it was liberation. I mean, look at this quote. He completely flips the script. They thought they were kicking him out, but he realized they were the ones who were trapped inside, stuck being slaves to their own pointless little rules.
So, cast out on his own, Diogenes heads to Athens and starts what you could call a philosophical performance piece. He lived on the streets, famously in a big ceramic jar with basically nothing to his name but a cloak and a staff. People started making fun of him. They called him kynikos, which means dog-like, because he was living like a stray. But just like with his exile, Diogenes took the insult and owned it. He said, "Yeah, I'm a dog. A dog lives honestly, according to its nature, free from all your vanity and hypocrisy." It became his whole mission.
So, how exactly do you live like a dog philosopher? Well, Diogenes had this amazing slogan, probably inspired by his original crime, recoin the currency. But he wasn't talking about money anymore. He meant we have to reevaluate everything, all of our social values.
At the absolute core of his rebellion is this fundamental conflict. On one side, you've got physis. That's our true, raw, biological nature. It's how animals and little kids live. It's simple, it's honest, and it's the source of real freedom. But on the other side, you have nomos. These are the artificial rules, the laws, the traditions, the obsession with reputation that society piles on top of us. For Diogenes, nomos was the source of basically all human misery. His entire life became a performance to prove that physis should always win over nomos.
And he built his whole lifestyle on 3 core pillars, 3 practices that he believed would lead to true freedom. Let's break them down.
First up, autarkeia, or self-sufficiency. This is all about radical independence. Get this. The story goes that one of Diogenes' only possessions was a wooden cup, but one day he saw a child drinking water from his cupped hands and immediately just threw his cup away. He realized he didn't even need that. The lesson is so powerful. True power doesn't come from having everything. It comes from needing nothing. Okay, the second pillar is the one that gets everybody. It's the most shocking one, autarkeia, or shamelessness. Now, this wasn't just about being crude for the sake of it. It was a philosophical tool. By doing things like eating, sleeping, and even masturbating right in the middle of the marketplace, he was making a huge statement. He was saying if an act is natural, it cannot be shameful. It's only society's fake rules, nomos, that create the feeling of shame. He was literally using his own body to take a sledgehammer to social taboos. And finally, we have parrhesia. This means radical frankness or courageous truth-telling. For Diogenes, this was a moral duty. It meant you had to speak the truth directly and without fear, especially to people in power, no matter what might happen to you. This isn't just being witty or sarcastic. It's a direct, fearless challenge to hypocrisy wherever you find it.
And there is no better example of this than the most famous story about him. Alexander the Great, the conqueror of the known world, comes to see Diogenes. He stands over this guy living in a jar and offers him anything he wants. Anything. And Diogenes, practicing both self-sufficiency and radical frankness, just replies, "Stand out of my son." It's incredible. He's showing Alexander that the man who wants nothing is way more powerful than the man who has everything. It's got to be one of the greatest power moves in all of history.
Now, you might think that a guy like this, a supposed madman living in a jar, would just be a weird footnote in history, right? Well, you would be wrong. His rebellion echoed for centuries, influencing thinkers and movements in some really surprising ways.
Right away, the Stoics in ancient Rome, they loved his stuff. They admired his commitment to virtue and self-sufficiency, even if they did kind of sand down his rough edges a bit. Flash forward a couple thousand years to the 19th century, and you've got Friedrich Nietzsche calling the Cynics the only truly authentic philosophers for rejecting conventional morality. Then, in the 20th century, the French philosopher Michel Foucault became obsessed with parrhesia, seeing it as a crucial model for how to challenge power in our modern world. And maybe most famously, Diogenes was reborn as a hero for the 1960s counterculture. For a whole generation that was sick of consumerism and conformity, Diogenes was the original dropout, the ultimate anti-establishment icon.
Think about that other famous story, where Diogenes is wandering around Athens in broad daylight holding a lit lamp. When people asked what he was doing, he'd say, "I'm just looking for an honest man." Well, the counterculture movement took that symbol and just ran with it. The lamp wasn't just about finding an honest person anymore, it became a symbol for searching for capital T truth, for the mind-opening revelations of psychedelic drugs, and for the single individual shining a light on a dark, corrupt system.
So what is the deal? Why does this homeless, shameless, ancient philosopher still hit so hard thousands of years later? It's because Diogenes did something totally radical. He turned philosophy from some abstract thing you talk about into something you live every single second of every day. He showed us it's not what you write down, it's how you act. He tore down the wall between the mind and the body, between human and animal, and he proved that the only power that really matters is being the king of yourself.
Which brings us to the big, final question. What would this ancient rebel have to say to us, right here, right now?
I mean, just think about our modern nomos. It's the unwritten rules of social media, isn't it? The endless pressure to buy more stuff, the perfectly curated online lives we're all supposed to have. Diogenes fought against the artificial rules of his day, and honestly, his critique feels more urgent now than ever before. He forces us to ask, what are we doing just because everyone else is doing it? So, I'll leave you with his challenge, the one that defined his entire life. Diogenes was exiled for defacing physical currency, and he spent the rest of his days recoining the currency of society's values. And so the question he leaves for all of us is this: what values, what beliefs, what conventions in your own life need to be recoined? What would happen if you just decided to stop pretending?